So I figured I'd talk about my great grandfather. Uh, this was my grandfather that pretty much raised me, his father. I never knew him. He died of a heart attack in the 70s. And I always wanted to meet this man. And the main reason why is because his wife and son pretty much raised a lot of my family, at least raised half of it or whatever. Like, my grandmother's parents on the other side kind of raised some of it too. When I say that, it's not like my grandma and grandpa were bad parents or anything like that, but like my grandfather was a Marine Corps fighter pilot. My grandmother was you know, a dancer at various points, a stay-at-home wife at various points, worked at various other places, and as such, like they needed help taking care of the kids. And whenever this was possible, they got help from their parents, as you should, in my opinion. But anyway, as such, I grew up around people that knew this man, and the thing that I got told a lot was, "God, you remind me of of your great grandfather." I don't know exactly what kind of person he was, but apparently a lot like me, and that makes me really curious. And the main thing that makes me curious about this is like my grandfather always just adored me. I was like the apple of his eye. And the reason was, it was like his daughter had a son, and that son was so much like his father that he saw someone that, would be a replacement for him when he died, basically. And like, I think that's why he spent so much time and put so much effort into doing stuff with me. you know, in addition to a lot of other stuff too. Like, I was his grandson, and it's a cool thing to have someone else that's into all the same things that you are. And I think that's the other thing that really made my grandfather love me was from the day I was born, I was into fighter planes and guns and camping and everything else. Like, it was a list of shit that maybe it wasn't 100% everything he was always into, but it was always stuff that he really, really liked and valued already. And it was like, you know, he got more into those things to, encourage my interest into them. But, that's also at the same time, we were going through, the build up to Y2K at this point, because this was the 90s. And he was slowly getting more and more into preparedness and guns and hunting and all sorts of other shit. But it made him like the perfect person to raise a kid, in my opinion, at least for the now times. Like, I went to school and I learned stuff, but like everything that's ever helped me really in my life, I didn't learn in school. I learned fucking around on the weekends with my grandfather. And like the stuff that he taught me wasn't, necessarily how to do X, Y, or Z on every little thing. He taught me how to think, basically, and how to problem solve everything. It's not, this is how you fix a window. It's, well, we look at this and, well, we know that we can do X, Y, or Z about that. And like, he taught me how he thought. And I cannot tell you what a gift that is. And not that, he necessarily thought the best about everything, but he was very intelligent and had a very well ordered mind. And he passed that on like a motherfucker. And it's honestly, I would be a hopelessly lost person today if it weren't for my grandfather. And all of this just makes me want to meet my great grandfather so fucking much. Because apparently he was well known for being able to fix anything provided that you were willing to listen to the noise. And by that I mean it would sound something like "Bucka chicka fucking jacka jacka fucking you motherfucking nerd, I'm gonna fucking you motherfucker fucking fucks." It would sound like that for an hour on end while he fixed like a water heater or some shit. I'm like, that does sound a lot like me in reality. Like, I tend to do that kind of shit if I'm like frustrated and hanging upside down and trying to fix a thing that's already hot and burning myself doing it. Yeah, that sounds a lot like me. The other shit that sounds a lot like me is that like he had to have a fucking shop full of tools and had to, fuck around with shit and make things. He made clocks and like grinder things out of wood. It was like a bunch of dovetail cuts with a little handle on it that like it would move the pieces. And he called it a bullshit grinder, and he made a bunch of those. And it was just like to show off that you could do it woodworking wise. It was a very complex thing to make, especially by hand with hand tools. And like this was the thing with my great grandfather is he was a pattern maker. Um, a pattern maker makes the negative that you use to make a mold. So, like, if you're casting a bell, a pattern maker would carve a wooden bell and then use that to make the mold. And this is like really, really old tech. Nobody does this shit anymore. But that's in World War II, this was, you had to do this. And my great grandfather was on a truck on his way to be in the army when he got pulled off of the truck by the War Department or something like that. Like it was something big, and they pulled him off of the truck because in the intake process or whatever, in the shit he filled out, he was a pattern maker, and it took them a week or something like that to like have this all work out or something. But they found him in transit to fucking basic training and pulled him off of that and sent him to some place where he was carving shit to fucking cast bombs and hand grenades and shit like that. So like as I understand it, if you see like a hand grenade or a bomb casing or a fucking mortar round or something like that in World War II, those are all made from castings. My great grandfather made the wooden pattern that made the mold that made all of those. His name was Ralph Claiborne Brown Sr. No one even probably knows his name but our family. And yet, his ability to turn what he saw in his head into reality in wood made bombs and hand grenades. I think that's really fucking cool. I I wish I could have met him. It's one of those things like I don't even know what I lost by not knowing him. His wife was crazy. And like honestly, if you met the woman that I loved, you'd say she was crazy too. And I think I think my great grandfather is a little crazy. My great grandmother was pretty much a housewife who also kind of worked an office job on occasion for a doctor. She was like a office assistant kind of thing. And they made an interesting couple. Their house was filled with clocks that my great grandfather made. They would go off at different intervals. My grandfather apparent or great grandfather apparently lived for practical jokes and fucking with people. Also sounds a bit like me, to be honest. It's fun. I like doing stuff just to like cause people to be surprised. It's not even so much making somebody laugh necessarily as occasionally just scaring the shit out of somebody makes me laugh. You know, my great grandfather apparently loved to torment my great grandmother. I don't mean that in a bad way, but I mean like he would do things around the house to just fuck with her, I guess. You know, change which side of the drawer the spoons and forks were on, or something like that, or ask her for a pencil when there was one next to him. Like I don't know, it's this stuff's kind of funny to me, and it's not like he was abusing her or whatever. Apparently, it was a game between them of some sort. I don't fully understand it, but good on them. My great grandfather invented the Ramsey winch. If you know what that is, if you've ever seen a winch on the front of a vehicle, the Ramsey winch was like the first one of those, and it was made here in Tulsa. I think they're still made here today. Ramsey was the money behind it. My great grandfather was the idea man, inventor, and when he died, basically Ramsey ended up with all of that, as I understand it. Anything that we got out of that was whatever his salary was. I think that's kind of shitty. That's nothing against Ramsey or anything like that. That's just I don't know. There's a lot of stuff like that with my great grandfather, where like the thing that motivated him was not money. Uh, my great grandfather used to own way more land than what the house is on now. The house is now on an acre, and it used to be on 5 acres, I think. But in addition to that, he also owned a whole bunch of property that was further south. If you're familiar with Tulsa at all, the entire area around 71st and uh, Memorial, just at like 71st and Yale, my grandfather owned all of that for a few years. Bought it, sold it, didn't make any money on it. I think that's hilarious because like that land now, if he had held on to that land, oh, he would have been like a millionaire, maybe billionaire. Like that land is worth so much goddamn money. Like they built a fucking mall there. Let that sink in. Like You know how much fucking money has to be in an area for them to build one of those malls back in the 80s? Yeah, he loved fishing. He had a old like wicker fedora that he had as a fishing hat that he had lures on. No, my grandfather also loved fishing. My grandfather had a resort on a lake, pretty much, I think, because his father taught him to like a lot of this shit. I I think it's funny too that my great grandfather made knives, at least to some extent. He wasn't a knife maker, but I know he made two or three knives. And this is the stuff that like I would love to have a 3 hour conversation with him about the nature of existence and the universe and all of that shit. Like I don't fuck everything else. Like tell me about how you met your wife and, and tell me what you believed. I wish I knew him. I'm going to cut this one off here. I think I'm crying too much. Um, in short, this is why this country matters to me to some extent. It mattered to him. It mattered to my grandfather. Like when I see Joe Biden shitting and pissing on our country, I think about this.